们因为这次活动呢是新趋势地产呢，这个联合周 Home 多方网一起主办的。那么在这里呢，有必要跟大家用很短的时间介绍一下这个周 Home 啊多方网。多方网呢，这个总部呢在中国的上海啊。那么现在有这个加拿大的多伦多和温哥华两地的这个平台，以及中国的平台。那么大家可以看这个，拿出手机扫一下左边周 Home 的公众号，在上面呢，每天都有新的即时的信息啊，去介绍多伦多的房地产的情况。那么还有温哥华站，如果大家想了解温哥华，也可以去扫一下看一下。包括我们这个周 Home 每一次的这个大咖之见的所有这个相关的文章和相关的视频哈，我们过后也都会放在那个上面大家可以看看前期一些个情况，每次是不同的话题。那么呢，这个也是说应该是多伦多非常全的一个地产类的平台。那么我在这里现在跟大家说一下哈，周 Home 它也是海外地产行业中文平台排名第一，我们指的第一是它的流量流量排名第一。那大温地区地产行业平台排名第一，而且它在温哥华大概是90%的华人都是在使用这个平台的那么 Google 的自然流量排名第一，百度自然流量排名第一，每个月的 IP 流量大概是近30万Page View 呢大概是近300万，独创了一些个很特殊的功能很独有的功能，像抖个房AR 找房实时街景看房VR 看房等。方便大家，特别像这个疫情的时候，很多人出不去门不敢看 Open House。那么这上面给大家呈现了一个7天24小时不间断的 Open House 的一个平台和工具吧。对，那么现在也有可以查历史的成交记录包括实时的可以给你的房屋进行一个评估和估价所以我们每一个这个使用者呢，都成为一个对地产很了解的一个专家那后台请放一下第一页第一页不是前面那一页前面那一页。对，然后呢，大家可以那个拿出你的手机扫一下右边这个手机下载的 app 这个二维码，扫下来以后呢，你就能这个在苹果和安卓这个平台上都可以免费的下载是完全免费的。下载下来以后呢，就能出现这个屏幕中间的这个它的开机的界面左上角大家看有个多伦多，那么里面也还可以选温哥华那这里面呢买新房、二手房等等，我们基本上是跟这个多伦多和温哥华地产局是对接的，所以呢系统呢就是拿到的数据呢跟地产局是几乎是同步的那在买新房里面呢，我们已经把多伦多和温哥华大概几百套楼盘的全部的信息包括户型图、价目表包括地图、照片、学区等等全部录入到里面去了。而且对于我们华人客人很方便的是，我们全部给大家已经翻译成这个中文了方便我们这个广大的华人朋友去这个寻找房子查看这些个楼盘非常的方便非常的方便。甚至在温哥华还有韩语版的所以呢，这个大家如果有时间可以下载，好吧？那行，那今天这个我们这个今天这个讲座呢，现在正式开始那么好，上一次呢，可能有些经常看我们节目的一些朋友呢，知道我们上一次做了一场这个 PREC PREC 是机遇还是挑战的这样一个话题。那么上一次呢，可能更多的是从这个税务的角度上来说去分析的，所以上次呢，我们也有幸请来了我们加州地产总商会的这个主席孙志峰先生，还有多伦多著名的这个会计师这个丁玉峰先生来我们从这个税务的角度上来去分析所以大家如果是看这个周 Home 的这个公众号，我们上一次的这个讲座的这个文章和这个相关的视频，都可以看得到。然后我在这里想跟大家说大咖之见所有的这些视频的资料。国内的朋友在这个腾讯视频上我们北美的朋友可以在这个 YouTube 上都能找得到都能找到，请输入这个大咖之见多伦多。那么我们这个大概现在已经做了20多期了一直在做，从疫情开始已经连续的做了20多期每周都有多伦多和温哥华的。好了，那里面有相关的都是跟地产相关的话题，大家不妨去看一看。那么上次做完以后呢，有很多朋友跟我们说 OK 因为当时好像市场上有好几家好几家公司和相关的这个 机构吧做了一些都是关于 PREC， 但是也都是从这个税务的角度上来说请的也都是这个会计师从税务角度上来说，当然 PREC 对我们这个税务上确实有很大的这个减免和帮助但是呢这也是这个我跟一些业内的人士的交流，他说很多人都说希望这个我们这个大咖之见这场节目能从下一次能从法律上深度的解析一下这个 PREC 作为一个经纪如何这个以公司签署关于 PREC 的文件。说实话 PREC 呢在我们这个 BC 省因为新居市这个地产的总部在温哥华在温哥华嘛，将近大概有400人左右也是温哥华大概是数一数二的华人地产公司。那边呢，像我们新居市里面大概有几十人都有 PREC 的这样的一个 title 了，所以这个 PREC 呢，在这个温哥华来说，应该说不是一个新鲜的事物应该是已经很多年了大概有很多人一些的有资历的大牌点的经济，可能很多人都有这个 title， 但是在多伦多呢，是从今年刚刚开始，地产局允许大家去申请 PREC， 所以对于我们多伦多的很多经济来说，那么 PREC 现在就是一个比较新兴的事物很多人不是很了解。那么上一次大家从税务上了解了，但是就是从法律上呢，说实话呢，不是所有的律师行都会做都做过这个 PREC 相关的文件，所以说呢，我们今天也很有幸的请到了这个二位他们呢是真的是这个有过这个相关的从业经验也是给很多的经纪人做过这个 PREC 相关的这个 document 这种agreement， 就是这种合同。所以呢，我们也是很有幸请到了这二位帮我们这个很多经纪朋友来解释一下。那么我简单介绍一下二位的背景那么这位帅气的这位律师呢，就是叫Kenneth 吴律师。那么吴律师呢，从事法律工作超过有10年了，为房地产投资和技术领域的客户呢，提供有关公司商业和证券法方面的咨询服务，重点是合资企业和私人投资基金方面的服务。曾在多伦多知名的这个很多机构为私人和上市公司投资进行并购以及公司财务和证券管理事务他有法学的博士和荣誉商业管理联合学位真是一个学霸级人物那还有一个就是这位女士呢叫 Judy 她是这个 PNB Law Group 的律师助理那么她也是精通安省和联邦的公司法，并且在成立公司以及公司重组方面有非常丰富的经验。加入这个 PNB 法律集团之前呢，在埃德蒙顿和温哥华做这个律师助理。好，两位也是应该说是身经百战了那么好，那今天呢，就是我们这个 Web Seminar 呢，就现在就正式的开始。那么现在呢，有请我们吴律师Kenneth 这个给大家讲解这个怎样已经公司签署 PREC， 以及这个相关的这个合同法律方面的一些个相关的要注意的问题。好，现在有请 Kenneth。Hi Kenneth.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me today, and good evening, everyone. Just let me pull up the presentation right now. Okay. Can you see the screen now, Anthony?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. So thank you again. So before we begin, just to everyone who's watching today and listening in, I will be presenting in English, and Judy is my colleague here, and we'll be answering questions and offering explanations to everyone in Chinese today. And as Anthony mentioned earlier, today's presentation is to give you the legal summary around setting up the personal real estate corporation, the Prec that we call it, PREC. And as Anthony just mentioned 2 weeks ago, Mr. Ding of MNP had explained all the tax advantages of setting up the Prec structure. So we won't be going over the tax advantages very much today. We'll just be focusing on the various legal considerations. So first off, before we begin, maybe just let me introduce myself. Anthony just mentioned I'm the managing lawyer of PNB Law Group. We're a boutique corporate law firm downtown, and I've been practicing corporate law in Toronto now for over 10 years. Judy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. 所以首先呢，要谢谢 Anthony 的邀请来，然后让我们有这个机会为PREC 做说明。我的名字是 Judy， 然后我在 P&B Law Group 工作已经3年多，然后之前我在温哥华跟 Edmonton 就有几年的工作机会。好的，那现在我们把这个主讲人就转给吴先生 Kenneth。
Okay. So maybe before we begin, just a quick word on what our firm does. P&B Law Group is a boutique corporate and commercial real estate law firm in downtown Toronto. Our clients range from, we act for large institutional landlords. We have boutique developers all around Toronto, and we develop assets all around Ontario. And we also act for individual investors, landowners, and families. One of our main expertise is in commercial real estate law. So we act for buying and selling commercial and industrial properties. We act for a lot of investments and joint ventures, development projects, apartments, condominiums. We do a lot of complex financings, and we do commercial leasing. We also have expertise in corporate law, so we do all types of incorporations, entity formations, shareholder partnership agreements. We do buying and selling businesses. We do private investments, investment funds, and reorganizations of all kinds of businesses. So the agenda today, like I said earlier, we'll be covering off the legal aspects of a PREC. So first of all, we'll talk about quickly what is a PREC. Then we'll cover off what is the attributes of a PREC. So what are the legal requirements for PREC? What is the business and investment restrictions around the Prec? Then we'll cover off what a sample legal structure looks like. Then we'll talk about what are the steps to set up the Prec that you should be aware of. And lastly, we'll quickly cover off what you'd expect in terms of costs and fees for setting up a Prec. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to type it into the Q&A or the chat box. So first off, what is the Prec? And I think many of you will know this answer already from previous presentations. But as of October 1, in Ontario, any broker or salesperson who's registered with RICO can incorporate a personal real estate corporation, which is what we call a Prec, and earn commissions through the Prec as opposed to personally. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, MNP presented to you all of the potential tax advantages of forming a Prec. And really the short answer is that the main reason you would want to form a Prec is to take advantage of a lot of the tax advantages. And some of these advantages include deferring income tax and potentially splitting income with family members. And as a general rule, Precs are likely more suitable for higher earning realtors. The reason being, for lower income earning realtors, you likely just won't be able to take advantage of all of the tax advantages. So that was just a quick summary of what that is. I won't go into it too much of what it is. I'm sure a lot of you already knew a lot of the content that was described before. Now let's go into legally, what makes a Prec and what is required. So a Prec is regulated under the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act in Ontario, and it must meet certain criteria. And we've summarized some of them here, which is it must be an Ontario corporation. There's rules about who has to own the voting shares. There's rules about who has to own non-voting shares. there's rules about who can be director, and there's rules about who can be officers. So first off, the Prec must be formed under the OBCA, which is the Ontario's Business Corporations Act. Most of the time when clients come to us to form a Prec, you're forming a new company. However, we do get the question that is, can I use an existing company? The answer is yes, you can. However, we would have to make sure that your existing company does fit the requirements. And depending on what your existing company looks like, it may require a reorganization or amendments to be filed. So most likely it is easier to form a new company, and most likely it's not cheaper to reuse your existing company. So we get asked that a lot. Another question that we get asked a lot would be, can I name my Prec, anything, or does it have to have the words, professional, real estate, what does it have to include? And so generally speaking, there are no restrictions. Your Prec can actually be a numbered company if you want, or you can use your own name. But of course, like any company in Ontario or in Canada, if you want to use a name for your company, you would first have to search the name to make sure you're allowed to use it and no one else has already used the name. So who can own the voting shares of the Prec? Now, what that means is basically who gets to control the Prec. And the law basically says that the controlling shareholder, which is you, the RICO salesperson or the broker, only you can hold the voting shares. The law says you can own them directly or indirectly. Now, I'll explain a little bit later what those words mean. A Prec can also have non-voting shares, and non-voting shares can be owned by you or your family members. And again, like the voting shares, they can be owned directly or indirectly. So what do I mean by directly or indirectly? So under corporate law, indirectly basically means that you can hold those shares through a holding company. So you can form a holding company to hold both the voting shares and the non-voting shares of your Prec. Now, the ownership requirements that I just described still have to be met. So let me give you an example. If you use a holding company to own your voting shares, then your holding company must be owned by you only. And if you use a holding company to own non-voting shares, then all of the shares of the holding company must also be owned by you and your family members. And if you're asking, well, why would I use a holding company? We will get into that throughout this presentation. We will be talking about why you would want to use a holding company. So we'll talk about that. The next requirement for a Prec is relating to director, who can be a director of the company, and only you, the controlling shareholder, can be the director. And likewise for an officer, only you can be the officer and you must call yourself president. So that's a little bit of a legal summary of how the Prec would look like in terms of ownership. Now, the next thing that's important that most clients ask is, what are the business restrictions? What are the requirements? What can I do with the Prec? So we'll cover off some of those legal requirements now. The first thing is, we talk about the Prec having a controlling shareholder, and the controlling shareholder must be the RICO registered broker or salesperson. That person must be employed by a brokerage to trade in real estate. Now, we've been getting asked a lot of the question, which is, the law says, I must be employed, by the brokerage, but in Ontario, in the industry generally, a lot of brokerages' relationship with their salespeople are by independent contractor agreements. So and so the question would be, oh, is that a problem? You know, and the answer is no. The word employed under the Act includes independent contractors also. So for the purposes of this presentation for the PREC, you know, employed includes independent contractor, and I'm not talking about, you know, what happened, you know, is it the same thing under employment law? We're not covering that up today. One of the next requirements is that the PREC is not a brokerage. So a PREC is simply the company that's owned by the realtor. It cannot act as a brokerage. And so related to that point, next rule is that the PREC cannot hold trust funds on behalf of a client, because that should be done by the brokerage. So, you know, when you close a transaction, the funds, or when you hold deposits, those funds do not get paid to the PREC. That's to be sent to the brokerage like you usually do now. Another question that we get asked a lot is regarding, you know, getting paid the commissions, and the question is, you know, even though after I form a PREC, how can I get paid my commissions? Can I still get paid, you know, some through the PREC and some paid personally directly as well? And the answer to that is yes, you technically can. Now, you might be wondering, and I was wondering for a long time, you know, why would the law allow you to do that? Well, why would I even want to do that? And that's a good question, because I'm not aware of any legal reasons that you want to, you know, take part of your commission personally and part of your commission through the PREC. Now, I understand that from a tax perspective, that there might be some minor benefits potentially relating to expenses that you may want to, you know, draw some commissions personally and have the rest go to your PREC. But I also understand at the same time, if you do that, there might be some CRA issues. So basically, practically speaking, from what I understand, speaking with accountants and other lawyers, is that this is not really something that is really done. If you do want to do it, and you want the ability as the realtor to be able to tell the brokerage, you know, listen, I want some of my commissions through my PREC, some of my commissions personally, then you have to put that into your brokerage agreement that you sign with the brokerage. And we'll discuss what that brokerage agreement looks like later. But that's one of the things you have to put in. And you know, if it's something that you don't know that you need now, but you think, but your accountant tells you, maybe in the future, you may want to be able to take some commissions personally still, then that's something that we have to add into the brokerage agreement for you. Another requirement is about what can you tell people about your PREC, and can you advertise to the public, you know, your PREC? And the answer is no. The objective of the PREC is really meant to be internal between you and the brokerage. So what that means is you cannot put your PREC's name on any advertisements, any flyers, even your business card cannot have your PREC's name on it. And that's a common one that we get asked a lot, and people get into trouble. Now, this question, what can a PREC invest in, is probably the #1 question that we get asked the most, because that's really the main reason why you are forming the PREC, is because you're making enough money that you want to save a lot of your retained earnings in your PREC. And so the question is, well, what can I do with that money? The easy answer is, when it comes to non-real estate investments, so let's say you want to buy stocks and bonds and GICs or even ARB, yeah, you can do that, not a problem. But in this industry, I would say 100% of our real estate clients like to invest in real estate, because that's what you know and that's what you like to invest in. And the question about, well, can I use the excess profits in my Prec to buy real estate? The answer is maybe. And this is where the law is very unclear. And I'll do my best to explain right now why it's unclear. And don't worry if after I explain it to you, you don't understand, because there's really another answer that clears it up. So the rule in the law about the Prec's ability to buy and trade real estate is that a Prec may not carry on the business of trading in real estate other than providing the services to the brokerage. So the last part, that's easy. We know what that is. The Prec provides services to the brokerage and the realtor function. So we know what that is, that's fine. But what does carry on the business of trading in real estate mean? So trading in real estate, those words basically means everything. It means buying and selling real estate. It means listing real estate for sale. So, what a broker does. It means advertising real estate, conducting and negotiating real estate transactions. So really everything about the entire real estate transaction is captured in that. So going back to the rule that says a Prec cannot carry on the business of trading in real estate. Well, what does that mean, you might ask? So let's use examples here. What if the Prec only buys one property, buys one condo, and it rents it out to one tenant to live in it? Is that allowed? The answer is, well, let's see. Is the Prec trading in real estate? Yes, that fits the definition of trading in real estate. Well, is the Prec carrying on the business of trading in real estate? Well, when you only buy one condo and have one tenant who lives in there, probably not. So in that example, yes, the Prec is allowed to buy one condo and put a tenant in it, no problem. But the answer gets a little bit more difficult when you look at other examples. So let's look at these examples here. What if you have that one condo, but if it doesn't have one tenant in it, you list it on Airbnb and you constantly have people coming in and out, and it almost is like a hotel room. Is that carrying on the business of trading in real estate? What if you own two rental properties? What if you own a portfolio of rental properties? What if you invest in a development project? What if you buy LP units? For those who've invested in development projects before, they're usually structured as limited partnerships, and you buy LP units. Does that count as carrying on the business of trading in real estate? What if you do a development project with two other partners? What if you buy a 4-unit apartment building and you convert it, or you build an extension and you turn it into an 8-unit apartment building? Are you carrying on the business of trading in real estate? These are all very real examples that all our clients come to us and ask us, because these are what, frankly, people in the industry, do with their money. In all of these scenarios, the answer is, I don't know, maybe, and no one has an answer for you. So what is the solution then? Well, the solution is, don't use the Prec to buy real estate. And so what we recommend is you form a holding company to buy real estate. And I'll explain what that means in a few slides. So now that we've covered off, what does a Prec look like? What is the ownership? What can it do? What can it do? Let me show you a sample structure of what a Prec looks like. So this is a sample legal structure, and obviously I say sample because every person's situation will be a little bit different, but this is generally what it may look like. You have, the Prec is at the bottom there, and most likely, you will hold your voting shares directly, and you control the Prec. And based on everything we just talked about, our firm's recommendation is typically that you have a holding company hold non-voting shares of the Prec for the reasons we just talked about. And the holding company is typically owned by you and your family members. And based on what we talked about, your holding company would be used to make all of your investments in real estate and other investments too. And also you'll see on the left-hand side here that, there's a brokerage agreement that needs to be entered into. That's one of the requirements for forming a Prec, that you, the Prec, and the brokerage enter into an agreement. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the holding company because we get a lot of questions about it. So like I said before, a holding company can own shares of the Prec. It likely, it would likely hold the non-voting shares. And really its purpose is so that as you make money in the Prec and have retained earning all your excess income in the Prec, the idea is to move all of that money into the holdco so that it leaves your Prec, okay? So that you can make the investments through the holdco. Now, what are the benefits of that and why do we want to do that? Well, one, we just talked about it. If you want to buy real estate, you should do it through the holdco because we don't really know what the law says about whether the Prec can buy real estate or not. So to get around that, to avoid being offside the regulations, you should do it through the holdco. Aside from that, it's good to do that for liability protection purposes, and I'll explain what that means. I'll explain using an example now with two different Precs. On the left-hand side, I have, example one. The Prec doesn't have a holding company. The Prec is just owned by you personally, let's say, and you and your families own it personally, and you make all of your investments through the Prec. The Prec owns all of the assets. And in example two, you have a holding company owning the shares of the Prec, and you do what we recommend, which is you move the monies up to the holdco, and you use the holdco to make all your investments and own all your assets. So in this example, in the first example, if the Prec gets sued, you're getting into a lawsuit, then all of the assets of the Prec is exposed to the creditors who are trying to sue you. So keep that in mind because the Prec, the company itself, is not covered by the RICO professional liability insurance program. So let's say you, the realtor controlling shareholder, is found, did something wrong, committed some professional, negligence or did something and one of your clients sues you, they're likely gonna sue you and the Prec. So if they sue you, you will have insurance, hopefully that covers it, then hopefully you're fine. But they're also gonna sue the Prec, and it might be possible that they can go after the assets in the Prec. In example two, if we do the holdco method, then all of the assets of the Prec, we move it to the holdco and to make investments, buy real estate, buy stocks, buy bonds, whatever it is. If the Prec in scenario number two gets sued, there's nothing inside the Prec. They can sue the Prec all they want, but there's no assets there to go after, and your assets are safe. So this is what I mean by liability protection and why we highly recommend going the holdco method. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive upfront, but on the grand scheme of things, the protection that it gives you, it's really very little money to pay for that. So now we've covered all the various rules. I've given you a sample of what a legal structure looks like. let's talk about what steps in setting up a Prec look like. So again, this is just a summary of the kind of high-level steps. But we always recommend you start with talking to your tax advisor, because remember, this whole Prec product solution is to get tax advantages. So you should really start to talk to your accountant or your tax advisor. The next step would be the formation of the Prec. Then you would form the holdco. Then there's a step which we call the transferrin of the business assets, and I'll describe what that means later. And then there's entering into the brokerage agreement, which I referenced earlier, but we can talk about what that means. And the last step after everything is set up, the last step is to provide notice to RICO. So first step, you should talk to your tax advisor to see whether a Prec is beneficial to you. Like I said earlier, if you don't make enough commissions, then you may not have any benefit from setting up the Prec. So have that discussion, and there's scenarios where it's still beneficial to set it up. Another thing to talk to your tax advisor about would be determining the appropriate share structure for you and your family, especially if you have a holdco. You try to figure out how to structure the shares between you and all of your family members. And then the other thing you want to talk to your tax advisor about is the transferring in of the business assets. That's the step 4. We'll talk about what that means in a second. But as I mentioned earlier, 2 weeks ago, MNP gave a very good presentation, Mr. Ding, about the various tax considerations. So if you want to find out more, you can refer to the presentation that was given 2 weeks ago. So that's the first step. The second step is the formation of the Prec itself. So if it's a new company, then we would file the articles of incorporation for the Prec with the Ontario Ministry, and then we would organize the company to meet the requirements. Like I said earlier, it's possible. Clients have asked us, well, can I reuse our existing company? And then the answer is yes, but we still have to look at your existing company to see if it's suitable. Do articles of amendment have to be filed? Is a reorganization necessary? So most likely it's easier just to form a new company. Most clients who come to us and say, oh, I want to use my existing company, it's already there, I don't want to spend any more money, end up realizing that once we look into their existing company, it costs just as much to fix it. So we really recommend just forming a new one. After the Prec is formed, then we would turn to look at the holdco. Again, same thing. It's not applicable to everyone. We highly recommend it, but you have to determine whether you want to use a holdco or not. Of course, forming an extra company, there's some extra costs involved, but like I mentioned, we believe is worth the benefits of the costs. We talked about the flexibility to invest in real estate if you want, without worrying whether you're offside the regulations, and for the general liability protection that we talked about. And again, same steps as the Prec. If you want to use a holdco, then we would file articles for the new holdco, organize the holdco, in accordance with instructions from your accountant about how to set it up for your family. And again, if you want to use an existing corporation, if let's say your family already has one, it's possible, but we would still have to look at it to make sure that it meets all the requirements under the regulations. And if it doesn't, then we would have to potentially file articles or reorganize it. So again, yes, we can reuse it, but we'd have to double check anyway. So after that, if the Prec is formed, the holdco is formed, then we get to the step that's called transferring of business assets. I know this step wasn't described, fully. MMP touched on it 2 weeks ago, but I will describe it a little bit more. So what this step is first of all, is applicable to you if you have an existing book of business. So you're an experienced realtor, you've been doing this job for a while, then this step applies to you. And here's what it's really meant to address. It's meant to address a risk. And the best way to tell you about this is to basically describe for you the situation. Let's say you're an existing realtor, you've been doing this business for 5-10 years, you have a big book of business, you have a solid reputation, you have a goodwill in your reputation, everyone in the community knows you, and now you form your Prec. After you form your Prec, you close a deal for some of these existing clients. You earn commission off some of these existing clients that existed before you formed the Prec. You collect the commission, the brokerage pays that commission to your Prec, and now you file your tax returns at the end of the year and you think, great, I pay corporate tax return rate, I pay 12% on this commission. The CRA might disagree with that. The CRA might come to you and say, well, hold on, Angela. This client, that you've known this client for a long time. You've known this person. It was based on your existing book of business. Even though you earned this commission, even though you sold Angela, even though you sold your client's house after you formed the Prec, but that commission really relates to an existing book of business that existed before your Prec. So your commission, I'm going to tax it at 55% personal tax rate, because that's really your personal client asset that existed before the Prec. So that is your risk. Now, as you can tell, all that has to happen is once, and you've lost a lot of money to the CRA. So for that reason, this step exists. And what does this step look like? What this step really looks like is you sell all of your existing business assets to your Prec. And it's done through a mechanism called a Section 85 rollover. And typical assets that you sell would be the goodwill, so your brand. You sell your existing client list. And to the extent you have some receivables outstanding from the brokerage, that's an asset to you. You would sell that to your Prec as well through this Section 85 rollover. I won't get into too much details anymore about what this looks like, but it's a pretty small extra cost that's involved to do this step, but the benefits are great. So almost all tax practitioners, almost every accountant that you speak to, and you should speak to your accountant to talk about your situation, but almost all of them will recommend that you do this step. It's an insurance policy against the CRA coming after you for more taxes. Okay, so that's step number 4. Now we get to the next step, which is describing the brokerage the brokerage arrangement and brokerage agreement. And I know this is another big question that we get asked a lot, because it's not very clear. The act, the regulation doesn't say what the agreement has to look like. So there's brokerages and realtors really don't know how to approach this agreement. So what is this agreement? This agreement is between 3 people. The controlling shareholder, you, is between you, the Prec, and the brokerage. And its main purpose is really for the benefit of the brokerage, to be honest with you. It allows a brokerage to satisfy its compliance obligations under RICO. And without going into what this agreement looks like, because it can be pretty detailed, but the typical provisions or concepts in this brokerage agreement are that the Prec and the controlling shareholder will agree to provide the brokerage with access to its corporate records to assist with compliance. The Prec will agree to assist the brokerage with any compliance with the regulations and with any RICO proceedings. The brokerage basically wants to know and needs to know that the Prec and the controlling shareholder has set up the company properly. Because if it doesn't, then this doesn't work. So what it will also typically want is it will want representations and warranties from the controlling shareholder and the Prec that the Prec was properly set up and is compliant with the regulations. And typically what would happen is there will be a standard indemnity in favor of the brokerage from the Prec and the shareholder. And what this means is, what the indemnity means is that in the event that the Prec is not set up properly by the controlling shareholder, then the Prec and the controlling shareholder will cover any damages sustained by the brokerage as a result. So for example, a realtor doesn't set up their Prec properly and it's against the rules, and it starts collecting commissions from the brokerage, and now RICO finds out, audits you, and penalizes everyone. And the brokerage is penalized because the brokerage should have known and didn't know, or the brokerage asked you if it was set up properly and you said yes, but it really wasn't. And the brokerage has a penalty from RICO, or the brokerage has to hire a lawyer and incur legal fees to deal with the problem. Then that indemnity it would basically say that the Prec and the controlling shareholder would cover the brokerage for those costs. We've been approached by some realtors that say, what do I do if my brokerage doesn't have one? Because let's say it's a small brokerage and that brokerage just hasn't had to prepare one. This law is pretty new. And so in our case, if you come to our firm to set up your Prec, we will, and your brokerage does not happen to have one because they haven't dealt with a realtor that's had to form a Prec, then we can prepare that brokerage agreement on your behalf with our firm's form of brokerage agreement, because we've done this brokerage agreement with a few other brokerages. So those are the main steps that I just covered. And so once that's done, you've formed your Prec, you've done the Section 85 rollover, you've now negotiated and settled the brokerage agreement with your brokerage. And the last step is to notify RICO that you've set up a Prec. And some people forget this last step, but you have to do it. If you don't notify RICO, you can't actually collect any commissions from the brokerage until you've done so. So they note the date that you tell them, and only after then can you get the commissions from the brokerage. So that really covers off all the major steps in forming a Prec. I can't stress enough that the regulations, like this presentation today, it's half an hour, 40 minutes. It's really a summary today that I've given you, that the regulations have a lot more details. So you really need to consult a tax advisor. You really need to consult a lawyer to properly set this up. If you want to take one thing away. The reason is if you don't, it has implications for you, it has implications for the brokerage, and it will cost you. And, so we get asked all the time, from realtors that say, oh, I've experienced setting up companies. I have lots of numbered companies. I'll do this myself. Don't rely on template corporations from the internet. Don't reuse existing companies without really having a professional look at the company, because it's easy to get it wrong. And lastly, don't just sign any brokerage agreement without understanding what it says and having someone look at it, because we act for certain realtors across a different brokerages, and sometimes that brokerage agreement, like I said, there's no requirement of what that agreement says, and no brokerage really, because the law is so new, there's no set form of what this agreement looks like. So it's possible that some brokerage just comes up with their own crazy agreement for you to sign. So please just keep that in mind. Don't blindly sign it. It's not a standard agreement. So we've talked about all of that now, and so I guess in everyone's mind, it's going to be, okay, well, if I have to hire someone to do this, what am I looking at? What are my expectations for costs? It's pretty simple. We've talked about it. You need a tax advisor to help you understand, the Prec and how to set up the shares for you and your family. You need a lawyer to help you set everything up. And then you need to pay corporate filing fees for incorporating or fixing your company or filing amendments. With our firm, we charge a fixed fee, and the range is anywhere between $1,600 to $2,800, and that's including filing fees to the government. There's a range that depends on your ultimate legal structure that we structure for you, but we always give you a fixed fee before we start so that you don't get surprised. I know a lot of lawyers, charge by the hour for this kind of stuff, and and then they always tell you that it's more complicated than it is. And then they charge you more because they spend more time. So this fixed fee includes everything you need that we just described. So we work with your tax advisor to understand what structure you need. It includes forming, incorporating, organizing your legal entities. We do the Section 85 rollover agreements for you as part of this cost. We review and negotiate your brokerage agreement, and if your brokerage does not have a brokerage agreement, we will, like I said before, we will provide you, we will provide your brokerage with a form of the brokerage agreement that our firm uses at no extra costs. We will correspond with RICO for you. And after we incorporate your Prec, and if you have a holdco as well, we actually host those corporate records online. We use a digital minute book platform, so no more calling your lawyer to get minute book records. We give you an account through our system, and you can log on online and see your corporate minutes and see your corporate records online. So that brings us close to the end of the presentation. And then again, this presentation is really intended for general information only. Please don't take this presentation and take it as legal advice. You really need to speak to someone because every situation is a little bit different. And this is just a summary today. If you do are interested in this and you want to find out more information from RICO and OREA, I posted some of the links here. They're fairly informative. The first link is to RICO, and then OREA actually has a guide that talks about a lot of this as well. And they have a very good FAQ as well that answers a lot of common questions. So, but we still have a lot of time today. That brings us to the end of the presentation. So why don't I, open it up to questions, and if anything needs to be explained in Chinese, Judy can step in and explain those. So over to you, Anthony.
Okay. Thank you, Kenneth. It's wonderful. It's quite clear, and also thank you for giving us such a good deal to all of the realtors today. Okay. Judy， 下一步是你要说一些，要总结一些前面那个 Kenneth 的一些个 high point 吗 ？highlighted point 吗？还是把那麦克风开开 ，Judy 把麦克风开开。
好，我们先看看有什么样的 question 吧。
OK， 这样吧，那我就问一些 question。OK， Kenneth, there will be some questions at the Q&A。是各位这样哈，就是您把那个鼠标器呢放到这屏幕的正下方，里面有个 Q&A 还有 chat 啊，你可以把你的想问的问题，正好今天趁着这个吴律师在啊，大家什么样的问题，可以尽情的上面这个写完以后呢，我会代为问一下这个二位，好吗？这是个非常好的机会。然后今天呢，说实话，我知道可能有很多的经纪朋友们还有很多也有很多可能是公司的这个管理者呀，或者是公司的老板可能也会参加今天的这个活动。那么这样的话，其实是一个非常好的机会因为这个确实是对我们多伦多经纪和经纪公司来说是一个崭新的事物。所以说呢，刚才这个吴律师也说了，很多细节的问题呢，可能在今天这里不见得能一一解答的清楚所以大家可以跟他们去联系可以跟他们去这具体的问题可以具体去分析。好，Kenneth, there will be one question. Is PREC covered by my insurance?
So I assume the question is it covered by your RICO insurance? And the answer is no. So your professional insurance only covers you personally. So in the event that, let's say there is some professional negligence or professional misconduct and someone might try to sue you, and they sue you and your Prec is not covered by insurance. So, and I think we actually specifically said that is one of the reasons why you want to form a holdco, is to move some of the assets out of your Prec, so that if that does happen, unfortunately, then your assets are protected.
OK， 今天我正好想先插一句今天因为可能有些新朋友今天是第一次来听这样的讲座，那么按照我们这个常规呢，我希望大家就是踊跃的提问了以后呢，我们这个周Home多房网呢会在节目的最后呢，会就是把这个精美的礼品赠给今天提问题最踊跃提问题最多、质量最高的那一位观众朋友。好的，so the next one. At the time you set up PREC, do you need to put your family members as no voting shareholders?
The recommendation is always yes, if you are able to set it up once at the beginning, it's always preferable. Is it possible to add a family member later? That is possible. This is where I think you'd have to speak to an accountant. This is a little bit beyond me, but it's a little bit more complicated. You have to, there might be some extra steps to add a family member later. So it's always easier to add it at the beginning, but it's possible.
Okay. The same person have another question. Do you need to buy insurance for PREC like other corporation?
That's a good question, actually. Now, that would depend on what else you're doing with the corporation. But it's possible you would want to do that. I actually, I have to say, I don't fully know the answer to that question. It's never really come up for me personally, because I would say probably close to 100% of my clients actually have holdcos, so they don't actually keep assets inside their Prec. So personally, from my experience, I haven't had to deal with that. And so if you do have a holdco and all of your assets are out of it, then likely you wouldn't need to do that.
Okay. Okay. So the next one, I have received some commission income from my brokerage before I incorporate my PREC. Can I now use Section 85 rollover to transfer the commission income to my PREC? That's a long question.
Yes. Yeah. So okay. So yeah, I think we covered that a little bit earlier. So the answer to your question is depends. When you say I receive some commissions, have those commissions been paid to you? So let's take, for example, if now November, a realtor has not formed their Prec yet, and they sold some houses in the summer, the commission is sitting at the brokerage. If that commission has already been paid to you, then the answer is no, it's already been paid to you. It's income to you already. But if your question is your brokerage is currently holding on to that income and it has and you have a receivable from the brokerage, so they owe you that money, and the question is, can you tell the brokerage to hold on, let me go for my Prec first, then send me the money to my Prec? Then the answer is yes. That's exactly why you would use that Section 85 rollover to roll over the receivable into the Prec, and then you take the check.
Okay. The next question, can a brokerage be converted into PREC?
The answer is yes, it can. But you'd have to make sure on the registration side, it's unregistered as a brokerage. But the answer is yes, it's possible.
Okay. Okay. Another question is read in Chinese, so hopefully Judy can be translated to English to Kenneth. Okay. PREC 并不能广告啊，签合同也不能用 PREC 的名字签，还是 agent 自己的名字签。在这种情况下 ，PREC 会有什么被告的风险？我想不出来啊，能不能举个例子 ？PREC 会被告的例子？因为我能想到的，合同都是经纪自己签的，就算要告也是告经纪啊，不应该牵扯到PREC。不知道我的理解对不对？啊，注意。
So the question is, PREC cannot be advertised when the agent signed the contract. You cannot use PREC's name, and the contract is the agreement is signed with agent's name. So under that situation, this person doesn't know what the risks are. She or he cannot think of any examples where PREC will be sued because when they sign the agreements, the names are in the person's name, but not in the PREC's name.
Right. Yeah. So don't forget, like, so what you're referring to is right. You know, there's rules about, you know, signing, but that's only relating to the trading, your business, your brokering business, right? But remember that there's really no restrictions on what you can do with the Prec, right? The only restriction we talked about was, you know, whether you can own real estate, right? But it's really anything else. Like an example would be, let's say your Prec decides to rent an office space and enters into a lease, and then you breach the lease, you get sued. Your Prec rents a car and crashes the car, you know, like things like that. Like your Prec can enter into regular day-to-day contracts and do things, so it can get sued.
所以
注定你来 ，sorry。
OK 好，所以它就是如果说这个 PREC 有被 involve 在其他的 business， 像是 Ken 说的说，如果说他有sign 个 lease， 然后但是你 breach 那个 lease， 就是并没有去遵守它的规则的话，你有可能被告的情况之下，那这个 PREC 有可能会被告上法庭这样子，那所以就会有一些 risk。
Okay. Okay. And the next question is, if I don't intend to investing in real estate with my retained earnings, do I still need to set up a holding company?
So, sorry, Anthony, can you repeat that? My internet cut out a little bit. Sorry.
Okay. So if I don't intend on investing in real estate with my retained earning, do I still need to set up a holding company?
Right. Yeah, so we talked about, one of the reasons you should set up a holding company, is if you're not sure, whether it affects your ability to invest in real estate. So you're right to ask that if you don't today intend on investing in real estate, then maybe you don't need a holdco. But that's only one of the reasons, right? We still like to recommend setting up a holdco because it offers that a liability protection reason as well, so allow you to move the assets out of the Prec, and also for flexibility reasons. I know today you don't intend on investing in real estate, but if you have a very as the years go on, you make a lot more money, the market environment changes and opportunities come up, you may want to invest in real estate in the future. So setting up a holdco gives you that flexibility to do it, but also in the liability protection.
Okay, so next question, it's a long question. I have closed on some deals in the past few months, and my broker is holding my commission in trust right now. If I set up my PREC right now, can I have those commission paid to my PREC?
Yeah, so that's the same question that Cal just asked earlier. So the answer would be yeah, if you close on some deals, but that commission is still sitting in trust at your brokerage and it's a receivable today, it hasn't been paid to you, then yes, you can form the Prec today, use the Section 85 rollover to transfer that into your Prec, and then you can collect that into your Prec.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So far, that's all the questions. Are there any more questions? Okay, there's more question. Can you set up a holding company at a later time when it is needed?
Yeah, so it's similar to the question of can you add a family member later? The answer is yes, you can. It's always a little bit more complicated to do later, but it's possible. We always recommend it's simpler and cheaper to do it upfront.
Okay. So, okay. Oh my God. Next question. Is the commission for pre-incorporation deals taxed at the lower rate or the higher personal rate?
I think the answer. I think the question is saying, if you didn't form a Prec, like so currently you're taking your commission personally, versus if you form a Prec, like what's the which is better from a tax perspective? I think that's the answer. So the short answer would be, yeah, if you don't have a Prec and you're taking your commissions personally today, then that will be taxed at whatever tax bracket you're in at the personal tax rate, but it's always going to be much higher. But if you form a Prec and you take the commission into your Prec, then it will get taxed at the Prec level, much lower at the business rate. But like I said before, and again, I speak to your tax advisor. I'm not fully qualified to give you tax advice, but if the money goes into your Prec, but you need to spend the money, and you take it out of your Prec, then the math becomes pretty much the same. So that's why we say depending on your situation, you may not, if you don't make enough commissions and you end up having to take most of the commissions out of the Prec spend, then you may not have the full advantage of the tax deferral.
Okay. So the next question, what is the advantage to have family members shareholders?
The advantage would be a potential opportunity to income split. Again, the answers to this, I should probably refer you to the MMP presentation that was done 2 weeks ago. The rules around this, again, are quite complicated. I'm not fully qualified, but generally speaking, having a family member inside as a shareholder allows you to potentially give them some of the, take out some of the income through there. And let's say they don't have other income, they are taxed at a lower tax rate.
Next one, if I set up the company now in November, should I do tax return next year with my personal and the company, or just a personal for 10 months income?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. You have to speak to your accountant. It's not something I can answer.
Yeah, this is more like a
lot of tax questions. Maybe we should have invited Mr. Ding to come join.
Okay. Okay. Next one. How many you charge only for the broker agreement?
I would say reach out to me like separately. Like we don't typically only just do a brokerage agreement. We typically serve as realtors who come to us and have to form a Prec. Like I said, if you're asking that question, I assume maybe you run a brokerage. If one of your realtors comes to us to form their Prec and your brokerage does not have an agreement, we provide our firm's form of the brokerage agreement free of charge.
Okay. I think that is one is case by case. So if you really want to know what is the price range, I think the best way you can call the number on the screen, that's their office number, and talk to the Kenneth directly. And I'm pretty sure this Kenneth can give us a very good deal, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That the pricing that I have on this slides is I should have clarified. It's really for all of the clients that Anthony is bringing through, because he was so kind to let me present today. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question on the chat room. If an individual broker set up a PREC, are there any business asset can to be transferred to PREC? If yes, whether the ownership of the asset need to be changed on the name of PREC? These very professional questions.
I'm not sure I understand. Maybe I should open the chat box. Is there more?
Yeah, it's better you open the chat. Yeah.
Are there any business assets can be transferred to the Prec? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I usually, when we say in the context of setting up a Prec and we do a transfer in the business assets, we're referring to mostly what I talked about earlier, which is client lists, goodwill, and receivables. You're doing that to basically do one objective, which is defend against the CRA if they try to come and tax you for future commissions earned off of that goodwill and your previous client lists. so I don't know if that answers your question or not. To your question, like, are there any business assets that you can transfer to the Prec? I have to know a little bit more specific, like what you have in mind. Like theoretically, yes, you can transfer assets to the Prec, but whether or not you want to do that is case by case basis. I can't answer that right now.
Okay. Next question. 85 rollover. How to do? What amount need to be claimed? Can you give more details? For example, if I have 50,000 in Brokerage trust account right now, then to do the 85 rollover, do I claim 50,000 in that rollover form?
That's a good question, actually. So specifically, your question about the brokerage receivable amount, if it's 50,000, then yes, that's clear. That's what you would declare as the value of that receivable. But what's less clear is what value you declare for your, for example, goodwill or your client list. This is where I think this is why you have to speak to someone, a tax advisor, because that's really what they do. We take instructions from them as lawyers. They are the ones really in a position to look at your scenario and advise you on what to do. Now, the good thing, and I hope I'm not stepping beyond what I'm qualified to say, but from what I understand, speaking with many different tax professionals, is that whatever the number, the benefit, the beauty of a Section 85 rollover is that even, let's say, you get the valuation of your client list a little bit off, or the goodwill is a little bit off, and it's subsequently challenged. There really is not much of a tax consequence, because all you do is end up issuing more shares, and there's no much consequence. So that's why it's done that way. But I should say, for a detailed answer, this is a question for an accountant and tax advisor. So, Anthony, you should be sending these questions all to Mr. Ding.
Okay. Okay. Because of time, we just answered the last two questions. Okay. Your cost is including to set up the holding company?
Well, that's why I provided a range. Like on the higher end of that price range would include the holdco, and on the lower end of that range would have no holdco. But yes, in that range, it includes the holdco.
Okay. I think the last question, Anthony, do the Newstream Realty have the brokerage agreement for PREC? I think this question I can answer. Yes. We have the agreement for the PREC as a Newstream agent, and thank you very much for the Kenneth that gave us a lot of help. So as Kenneth and his law firm can have the out of the Newstream's agent to have the agreement. So thank you, Kenneth, and thank you for your law firm. So OK， 时间就是现在快到9点半了，所以呢。我们今天的这个讲座呢就先告一段落。那么按我们原来的老规矩哈，我们还是会奖励一个就是提问最踊跃的一个朋友。那由这个我们的 partner 也是慕斯家居哈，送出了精美的这个礼品。那我现在我就来选一下吧。刚才我看 Kenneth 好像有一个问题说的 good question， 就是在我们 chat 里面那个叫 CB 的这位朋友哈，我看写了2大段哈，那我们就把这个奖品给这个 CB 吧，好吧，这位叫 CB 的朋友，那么请联系这个屏幕下方的电话，跟我们的工作人员去联系啊，得到属于你的一个非常好的漂亮的一个精美的一个家居用品啊，那647-887-1286，好，以我们后台人员去联系。好的，那今天这个讲座呢就告一段落。然后如果大家好像意犹未尽的话呢，我们接下来这个所有讲座的视频呢，会放到这个周home这个公众号里面啊，所有的视频包括在这个 YouTube 上，比国内的腾讯视频，大家也都可以看它的回放啊。那 好的，那今天就到这里，那也是感谢这个2位嘉宾啊，在这个百忙之中，这个在这个周五的晚上啊，与我们一起相聚在线上，好的，那谢谢2位，Thank you Kenneth and thank you Judy，Thank you for the seminar。好，各位，
Thank you。
就再见。好，谢谢大家，谢谢大家的参与。我们2个礼拜以后，大咖之见，我们线上见。好，谢谢大家。Thank you very much。拜拜。
拜拜。